remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's what made you did.
I lied.
You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and I'm joined by Terry DeFellon of Sound of Football, Odd Job Pod, and Whom's Pods Destroy. And we've rented Commando. So, Terry, how was watching Commando again for you?
It was fantastic. Hi, Rich. It's one of my favourite movies from the 1980s, and it was a movie that I loved when I went to see it at the pictures, and I went to see it twice, and I'm just a big fan of Arnie films anyway, but this one for me is one of his strongest. And perhaps in many ways his weakest as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree. I didn't quite see it at the cinema. I did see it, I'll be honest, I was certainly younger than the 18 certificate suggested when it was when it came. It was the same as Predator, to be honest. But, it's one of those films that in many ways is the archetypal 1980s action film.
Yeah.
Rewatching it even today, you kind of think it's very, very 80s. There's not much, if you bring it into the current day, that would transfer, but you look back and you can just date it instantly. I mean, starting off, we've already discussed, we both ended up watching the director's cut of the film, which neither of us had seen before, and it certainly added a different perspective to it. There were some parts that certainly we didn't remember, and while it fleshed out certain parts of the character, certainly of John Matrix anyway, it was a little bit strange, going back to an old favourite and rewatching bits. It's like, I say, going back to watching Star Wars again or something like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, assuming that there was some grisly scene in which someone's arm is cut off, but of course that actually does happen in one of the Star Wars films. So, in more than one, in fact, even one of the good ones.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the climax of the movie which is particularly graphic, and the censors, I think, actually on this occasion wisely took it out of the theatrical edit in the UK, because it is very graphic, and one of the soldiers, one of the cannon fodder who meets a grisly end, and Arnie cuts his arm off with an axe, by the looks of things. And it's very graphic, and also his reaction, the chap who's had his arm cut off, the whole reaction afterwards is very traumatic. And up to this point, this movie has been bubbling on as a wonderful sort of like cartoony action film. And then suddenly this very, very real and quite horrific thing happens. And it does actually check me out of the movie, which is surprising, because I've seen, I don't know how many times I've seen this film. I went through a period of the teenagers years when it's possibly at one point the only film I ever saw for a while, but I've never seen that, and that was weird.
And it's strange. It's that sort of very brief 10-15 seconds ended up being more like one of the Saw films or something like that, where it takes you away from what was essentially a B movie. With one of the trivia points I read was that there were more extras in the film than cast members. And the fact that they're all there purely to die at Arnie's hands, he outlives his purpose, I guess. But the
whole climax is just something else. It's just amazing. I went and I saw it at the pictures. I mean, at the pictures, it's funny when you say it's like a perhaps a typical 80s action flick, but this movie was sort of on the back of the second Rambo film. Which was rubbish. It was a really... First Blood was superb, but the Rambo movie was just utterly charmless. And it didn't... First Blood was quite serious and very intense. And Rambo was also an attempt to be serious and intense, but it just lacked that intensity because it was a sequel. And it was clearly just nothing more than an opportunity to make more money. There didn't seem to be any kind of artistic value in the movie. And I know that sounds ridiculous because it's an 80s action film, but there was just no merit to it at all. And I went into Commando thinking, well, I don't know. I don't know whether I've got the appetite for this kind of movie, to be honest with you. I think it might be much the same thing. And actually, it's in the opening parts. So one, Vernon Wells turns up, and I go, hello, Vernon Wells is in this film. And then also when they kidnapped Matrix's daughter, when it looks like they're supposed to do some kind of deal for her release, and he ends up shooting the guy who's trying to lay down the law, and then going after him, in this, and the whole chasing there is even when they messed up his engine, and he pushes his 4x4 down the hill going after him. And I thought, this is going to be quite a different film. And we were just laughing, watching the movie, just laughing. This is tremendous fun. And it's very much that is the tone of the film for me all the way through. But certainly the theatrical release, and for many years.
I mean, it's funny, and the film, there's no slow open to it at all, is there? It's the production company credits roll, and immediately you're into the scene with the cook and the other chap turning up as fake bin men, which is clearly not set in our part of the world, because they're turned up on the wrong day and everything else. They're not on strike, but the former Marine chap comes out, with his dropping his cat litter, clearly living a very suburban life these days.
Yeah,
and it launches straight into the pun of "I thought you'd miss me." He goes, "Don't worry, we won't." And you just think, here we go. There's no messing about here. It's straight into it.
It's straight into it, yeah. I mean, that guy, in fairness, that guy, I mean, I can't remember the character's name, but he didn't look like a crack Marine to me. It's got to be said. I wonder if actually he was the guy who did the taxes of Matrix's squad, because he seemed a little bit more like an office guy, but maybe, yes, as you say, he'd settled into domestic bliss a little bit too well, and they caught him off guard. Yeah, he should have. I mean, if that had been Matrix, he'd have been like, the dustbin.com on Tuesday, and then he would have been downstairs into his armory, tooled up, and that would have been the end of the film, really.
Yeah, and he would have been downwind, and downwind of whatever the rubbish bin was. We then met with Cook going into the car dealership and driving the other geezer out. He doesn't even hang about there. It's, what do I like most about this film? The price, as he steals a car. It's just, again, straight out the window. But it's the next scene after this where we're first semi-introduced to Bennett. And as you say, Vernon Wells, who was the baddie, was it Mad Max 2?
Yeah, it was, Mad Max 2.
And he describes the look of his character as Freddie Mercury on steroids. And you just can't fault. It's absolutely textbook. It's
a glorious look.
Yeah,
he looks fabulous. I tried
to Google, something like Freddie Mercury or in a chainmail vest or something. And I mean, some of the images that came up, it wasn't pretty. But this guy, you look at him and you think, crack Marine. This is one of the elite commandos who got Schwarzenegger on one hand, who basically a Nazi propaganda video strolling through the forest, and you've got the baddie from Mad Max 2. He's brilliant in it. Bennett, he chews up the scenery. He really he's a larger-than-life character. He has fun with it as well, and that's what you need in a film like this. You can't take it too seriously.
No, absolutely. And all of the bad guys in this, whether they be the villains, the henchmen, the side henchmen, they're all, most of them have all got something good going for them. They're good. They're good characters. So it makes it all the more gratifying when they get their comeuppance, because you feel as if evil people are having justice dispensed to them Arnie style, and it's very gratifying to watch.
And even the main guy, who shamelessly, and you can tell my viewing habits of perhaps the later 90s, I recognise as it was the dad from Clueless. He spawned Alicia Silverstone. So do
you mean the president?
The wannabe president, yeah.
The wannabe president.
Dan Hedaya,
yeah. He was in Alien Resurrection, which is for me a much maligned, unnecessarily maligned Alien film. I think that's a lovely, beautiful film. It's not very scary, but it's a lovely film. And he's Tully in Addams Family, which I adore. I adore that film, and he's always welcome. Whenever he turns up, but you think, all right, we're in safe hands.
That the main sort of plot of the film is that Cher's dad from Clueless hires or steals John Matrix back from his retirement to come and overthrow fictional Central American country, so that he can become the president. Now, this country is Valverde, which happens to be the same country from Predator and also Die Hard 2.
No.
Yeah.
I hadn't put that together at all.
Yeah, and it turns out that Die Hard 2 was originally written as a sequel to this film.
No.
It's crazy.
That would have been amazing.
I know.
That would have been so. They should have just gone from Die Hard to Die Hard with a Vengeance. That would have missed opportunity. There's a parallel universe out there somewhere in which that happened.
But then we're moving into the 90s now. I think Under Siege was the original script for Die Hard 3.
Was it really?
Yeah.
So they were going to use. They were going to. That kind of makes sense.
Die Hard on a boat. Yeah, I suppose.
Die Hard on a boat. That does. Yeah, they're at an area, in a tower, at an airport, on a boat. Yeah. No, I can totally see why that. But they obviously thought, no, we'll do something else, something a little bit more ambitious, because that's the one in Manhattan, isn't it? Die Hard with them.
Yeah, with Jeremy Irons.
Yeah, and Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah. That's a decent film, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it was alright.
Yeah, I seem to recall it being a decent film. It's been a long time since I've seen that, but I remember it being a decent film.
Going back to Commando again, at this point we've seen the guy with the bins dead, the car salesman dead, Del Boy for want of a better word, and also we think Bennett's dead. Bennett's boat blows up, and all of a sudden we go into sort of the Californian sort of forest where all of a sudden here he comes, Arnie with log in one hand, chainsaw in the other, the muscles rippling. He's
peak. This is peak Arnie, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean this was 85, so he was still ripped as
definitely. Yeah, AF. Yeah. What is it? It's 3 years after Terminator, and he was in pretty decent shape then, wasn't he? Was he a little bit? More.
It was maybe only a year or 18 months.
Oh, really? Oh, right, okay.
So, I mean, this was before, this was kind of, I think, the next film he did after Terminator, but, he's a goodie in this.
Yeah.
But then, again, to sort of change the tone, we meet Ginny. And,
yes.
And doing a little bit of martial arts.
Yeah, the montage.
It's
and then pushing the ice cream in her dad's face, and his fake laugh.
It's like something out of an advert for Polaroid or something.
Really stretching the limits of Arnie's acting ability as he tries to laugh off this hilarious prank, and sort of behind his eyes going, "I'm going to do it, break your neck."
I think single-handedly we can blame that scene for Twins and Kindergarten Cop and everything. Well, Junior, we'll blame it for that anyway. He's not, anything dodgy. He is a dad, and it's we get to
in fairness, that is not 100% clear, is it?
Well,
or is it? I don't know. In my innocent young eyes, I thought, right, it's his daughter. I wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he wasn't working at Radio 1, but she makes him what is seen as the world's worst sandwich, and he makes a really, looking back with our current eyes, looking back at his Girl George joke.
That was an old joke about 5 seconds after it was first ever cracked. Speaking as someone who was around when Culture Club went to number one for the first time, that was an old joke then.
And it's easy to sort of say, "Girl, why didn't they call him Girl George?" And then talking about growing up in East Germany.
East Germany, yeah. Rock and roll was subversive. Maybe they were right. Which actually is quite funny, although I would certainly disagree with the fact that Boy George had anything to do with rock and roll, but these are minor points, I think.
Yeah. We're into happy domestic bliss, and the helicopter comes out, and General Franklin Kirby and his little goons to come and warn Matrix that these commando killers, or whoever they may be, are knocking off John's old man. And we sort of met with the first real sort of test of how elite of a commando was John Matrix. This weird-looking guy in a sort of John Motson-style jacket pops up from behind a rock and starts taking out these allegedly highly trained soldiers. And we find that Matrix died because he smelt him. Now,
yes,
was that from aftershave, or he's obviously got finely tuned senses.
Yeah,
I don't really know how that would work. How you differentiate someone who clearly not a US Army soldier, but he may have come from a training. Is that a different scent they give off? Is he like a cat or a fox or something? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he's, obviously the Green Berets, or the Marines rather, who were left behind to look after Matrix, had just arrived in the helicopter, whereas presumably the interloper had probably come up the hill. So maybe he was a bit whiffy.
Yeah.
And obviously, as we found out seconds later, he was downwind, which is how we knew about it all. And maybe that's clearly how it happened, because what other possible explanation could there be, Rich?
But let's say we start having the gunfight, and as you mentioned earlier, this is Matrix. He's gone straight to his armory. Like you say, I keep in my shed a lawnmower and the barbecue and some old bits and bobs. He's got what could only be described as an arsenal. This is home defence, and in light of current affairs and all that, it's got a hot topic and that. And
sure,
let's be fair, at least there's a key safe on it.
Yes, absolutely. Very easy to open, though, in fairness. I reckon that could be hacked fairly quickly. Clearly designed for ease of access. Or was it just enough so that Jenny doesn't sort of get in there and start playing around with the guns?
He's probably already taught her anyway. But, Jenny, who's gone up to her room, I think, and hidden and is dragged out by unnamed goon. By the time Matrix comes back with one of his guns, and that chap sitting in her room on the chair holding the little heart that she'd made for him.
Like a scoundrel.
Oh, and he's just taunting him. He's like, oh, yes, you want to get your girl back, don't you? You want to do what's right. And we're just met with the one word, wrong.
Oh, and then boom. And it's as I said earlier, it's that moment that I'm sitting there watching this film, and I am now completely invested in this film. Because I was like, yes, here we go. He's going to do something really, really good now. And he did for the rest of the movie.
He launches from shooting this guy right between the eyes, straight out onto finding his Land Cruiser has had the brakes and all the cables pulled out. Some people might call the AA. Some people might decide, oh, God, what call an Uber. He's like, no, I'm at the top of a hill. I'm going to use gravity. And just push the bloody thing off the hill.
Gravity's a bit of a thing in this film as well, in fairness. Gravity turns up in another scene later on.
Yeah,
he does. He pursues them down this hill. And he kind of catches up with them, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, perhaps health and safety and risk averse were not words that they considered when writing the story. But I'm not sure if it occurred to him that he might bump into the vehicle carrying Jenny. But, that's crossed my mind as well. But I have so much faith in his soldiering abilities. Yeah.
That he doesn't. I don't think he puts a foot wrong, does he?
No.
At all. Events and circumstances might conspire around him, but he's only really towards the end when the bodies are really mounting up, as he starts to show any signs of frailty and weakness. At this point in the movie, the man is just an absolute colossus. So obviously he timed his descent to perfection, almost to perfection.
Yeah, he has a little scuffle, and once he decides he's going to take them all on, and here comes Bennett. Freddie Mercury himself.
Indeed.
Lording it up, camp as Christmas. Does him with a tranquilizer gun. Yeah. And it's just...
He wanted to use the real thing, of course.
Well. And again, we found that he offered to do it for free. He was getting... However much he was getting paid, he'd do it for free. All this just to get his own back on Matrix.
Yeah, it's a strong motivation, as Bennett said. Because, obviously Bennett liked killing a little too much, which I find hard to accept, to be honest with you, given just how much killing Arnie did up to this point, even in his early stage of the film. I think, he must have really liked killing too much. How much is too much, I think, in the...
I do have to think what their screening scores were in their application for elite Marines, but...
Yeah, mind boggles.
Yeah. At this point, they, Matrix is tied to the gurney or whatever, and the chap explains the plot to him and what he wants. He wants him to go to Valverde, kill the president, and install him as the military leader. It's a one-man coup. It's difficult because, Matrix obviously gives it the old, fuck you, wheeling out your daughter. How old is his daughter at the time? 12, 13, I don't know, with a... massive bloody knife to her throat. You're kind of over a barrel, really, aren't you? It's Even Arnie's not going to. Even Matrix is going to balk from something like that, is he? So But they take him to the airport. You know, to be fair, they get him to blend in because he's wearing the same clothes, but they put a very natty blazer on him as they take him to the airport.
And it is a fantastic blazer. In fairness.
I mean, it goes really well with the combat trousers and everything else. It's the mid-'80s. Of course, at some point in the film, we are going to hear Arnie's catchphrase, and he does it early. John, I'll be ready, John. I'll be back, Bennett.
Yes, right. I'll be back, Bennett.
And slams the door.
Right. Yeah, I'll be ready, John.
He's not even hiding the Aussie, is he?
No, it's weird because actually Bennett at the beginning of the film is trying to affect, I think, an American accent when he says, "Oh, hey guys," as he's getting on his boat. But it's completely gone by the time they go there. Maybe they just did a few screen tests and went, "Look, Vern, mate, this isn't going to work. Just go native and you'll be fine."
But save it for Neighbours. I don't know.
Was
him?
He wasn't in Neighbours. No, He went on to play a significant bad guy in Power Rangers. I don't know. I mean, I only looked him up on IMDb. I'm not a Power Rangers aficionado, or even a watcher of Power Rangers. Even I'll go that far. So I think that's where he's. Where he's earning most of his coin, or earned most of his coin in recent years. Yeah, before then I'd only known him as Wes in Mad Max, and he had a slightly different voice. That it was much huskier and a little bit, if it's possible, a little bit more manic than he was in this one.
Yeah, I mean, he's quite clearly deranged in some way. At this point, we're introduced to someone who, while having a small role, turns out to be one of the cult's Sully.
Yes.
Sully, who is a little shit, who basically implies that they're going to do all sorts to his daughter, so they give him a few beers, a few dollars to have a few beers. Again, someone you don't picture being in the Marines.
No.
I mean, again, he might be the comic relief. Sits at the back of the Jeep and cracks jokes. Yeah,
no, you're right. Yeah, he does. He could have been. I mean, he seems somewhat diminutive to be a Marine, and obviously a despicable human being. And I mean that's fine because I mean he goes the way of despicable human beings, or at least how we would like despicable human beings to go. I think certainly in this sort of universe. But yeah, I mean, his contribution to cinema can't be understated. His participation in some of the best lines in popular culture. Yeah, it just can't be understated. Sally, a very significant character.
Well, he is, and we get Matrix, and I can't even remember the name of the chap who he gets on the plane with, the guy who's, let's be fair, almost as large. Henrique or something like that. The chap with the hat, let's call him that.
Yeah.
He gets on the plane, and again we start with the jokes. Any oversized baggage, just him.
That was quite funny. Yeah.
Well, it was.
I think it's Enrique.
Enrique.
Yeah.
So we're on this plane. It's what you'd imagine a 1980s US jumbo to be. This big Enrique is guarding Schwarzenegger to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid.
He's doing a terrible job of it as well.
He is. He's cracking the puns. And when Schwarzenegger asks the air stewardess, "I need a blanket and a pillow," you think, oh well, he's obviously going to have a little nap for what we learn is an 11-hour flight. We get met with a scene that was also cut from, I believe, the theatrical release. Was it the headlock next and the elbow? It was an elbow then a headlock, wasn't it?
Was it? Do you know what? I think that seemed very familiar to me. So it's possible I've seen more than one version of this movie, but that didn't strike me as being different.
I'm sure when I was well too young and it was on ITV on a Saturday night or something, and they showed it and they showed Schwarzenegger just elbowing him in the face.
Okay, yeah, no, yeah, ITV were notorious for chopping movies, so I think that might be the ITV script. Yeah. I cut. No, I think the original theatrical still kept that in because it wasn't 18. In fairness. But yeah, I suspect ITV probably thinking, there's probably a lot of teenagers who watch this film because, after all, it's a tremendously fun film, particularly for teenage boys to watch. So,
it didn't do me any harm. Let's put it that way.
certainly not. Third eye just doesn't show at all. Barely seen.
Got my tinfoil hat on. So Schwarzenegger obviously realises he's got 11 hours. He's got to get off this plane. He's got to find Jenny, and he does what any normal person does. Fakes air sickness, and as you do, and you could probably do it on a Ryanair flight now, clamber down through baggage, out through past a very scary dog, and just down the landing gear. Why not? It happens all the time. Where I work in southwest London, we're right under the flight path of Heathrow, and more than one person has met a sticky end coming out these wheels, and Schwarzenegger's no different, although he seems to drop into some marshes, probably travelling at a fair old whack.
Yes.
And the only damage is that his blazer gets wet and he has to lose it.
Yes, he has to lose the blazer, which is a shame. So the blazer really only has a cameo. By this stage in the film, from my point of view, I'm completely bought into it, and I'm quite happy with that means of escape. I even as a I don't know what you like when you were younger, but sometimes you would watch movies and you go, "Oh, that's ridiculous! That'll never happen! That's impossible! That's stupid!" And then there are some, but I would make a point that if I was really enjoying this film, if this film was well made for what it is, then you just think, well, just get caught up in the narrative, just enjoy it, and don't worry about that. And I thought that was an audacious piece of plotting, I have to say.
It was, and then Schwarzenegger takes the piss out of this himself in Last Action Hero, when he drops off the crane into a big tar pit and crawls out and manages to get himself perfectly clean with just a wet wipe. And is the whole sort of how convenient.
Yes.
He's out of the plane, he's in the water, he's got the world's noisiest watch, but only when he looks at it, that says he's got 11 hours, so he has to run back to the airport. And Sully has decided, right, I've done my job, I've got him to the airport, I'm going to pick up a girl. I'm going to basically sexually harass anyone I find near a payphone because, it's 1985.
Yes, and no one cares.
No, because the done thing back then. Again, we're inadvertently meeting Cindy, the female, or the adult female interest of the film, who spurns, obviously she's a good girl because she spurns Sully's less than subtle moves. And I'll be honest, Sully, he deals with the initial rejection quite well. He sees it as a bit of cat and mouse in a game and follows her to a car, which is perfectly normal. And he's just, it's a courtship ritual in the Marines, I'm sure. All of a sudden, she, quite rightly stands up and says, you're really bugging me. And as you do, escalates, you fucking whore.
I know.
And I don't really know what. Did he hope that she'd hear that and go, "Oh, I like a bad boy"?
Oh, you've melted me. Yes, yes. All right, I relent. Yeah. No, that's a despicable thing to say. I mean, he is a despicable person, but So
obviously, at this point, Schwarzenegger has made his way back into the airport. Being the 80s, security was lax. He could just drift in because he's not wearing his blazer, so he's obviously not the same person.
Happier times. Yeah.
And he's followed them back, and so he decides that he needs Cindy to follow Sully because he needs to follow Sully to find out where Jenny is. And as you do, he doesn't commandeer the vehicle. He rips the front seat out of her Mustang or whatever the car is. Just not even real. But from Schwarzenegger, why not? Perfectly normal.
Well, I mean, he needs to, keep a low profile.
Yeah, and so he's probably about 2 feet taller than her anyway.
I don't think the seats on those vehicles go down very low anyway. And maybe, as you say, he's a big lad, so it's a perfectly reasonable way to proceed, I think, under the circumstances.
And so we follow Sully and we go to the mall, which was the mall from Terminator 2.
I haven't seen Terminator 2 in so many years that I don't remember that mall. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for the knowledge. And when I watch Terminator 2 again, I'll go,
And
that
if you see a phone booth turned over and it's, oh, well, we're jumping out. So we get into the mall. Sully's making a very dodgy transaction because he's a little fucker. Cindy points Matrix out to the security guard. Now, these are, I suppose, failed police officers, couldn't get into police academy, whatever funny noises they could make. She points him out and they decide, right, we're going to have him. And as they said, he's one gigantic motherfucker.
Yes.
And I don't know how many security guards, because I'm sure at one point there must be 14, 15 of them. He has them all. Yeah,
and he has them all. And that point when they're all piling on top of him and he just pushes them off. He just flexes them off like that. This is gratifying for anybody who has loitered in shopping malls and then therefore been harassed by morose, poorly paid security guards who just want a quieter life, and you've got these grotty toe-rag teenagers cycling around causing trouble, like very much like the Whitgift Centre in Croydon. I must confess that when I watched that scene, I felt a flash of, yes, go on, get those fucking security guards, teach them a lesson.
For loitering in a wimpy. So obviously Sully realises Matrix is off the plane. They have another little car chase. It's Matrix. I don't know what the driver training's like in the Marines. He can't drive for shit. Yeah. I mean, any idiot can put their foot down, can't control the car, he's banging all over the place. Eventually catches up with Sully's very understated yellow Porsche 911. Schwarzenegger and Cindy crash into a telegraph pole, which they weren't wearing seatbelts.
Should kill them.
I would like to think, had they had any sort of driver education, they'd have gone through the windscreen and over the cliff, which, because we realised shortly, they are on a cliff edge. And we are met with possibly the best quote from the film. Now, we'll have to go back and reference something we didn't say earlier. So Matrix, grabs Sully, roughs him up a little bit. Where's my daughter? Fuck you. Because, Sully's little, we're not giving that away, but Schwarzenegger just picks him up by the ankle and dangles him over a cliff. And I think, was that a packet of cocaine that comes out of his jacket pocket as well? Because you just drive around.
Because he's a wrong one, dealing drugs, trading fake passports for cocaine. Yeah,
because you need to have half a kilo sort of on you just to weigh you down.
It was the 80s.
Yeah, of course, greed is good. But you sit there and we remember that when Schwarzenegger spoke to Sully at the airport, he said, "I like you, Sully. You're a funny guy. That's why I'm going to kill you last." And he references this because he says, "This is my weak arm," because I assume he's a righty because he's holding him in his left hand. He says, "Remember when I promised to kill you last? I lied." Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, it's an epic quote. A part of the epicness of the quote is because it is a quote in two parts. As you say, you're a funny guy, Sonny. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last. And then it sets it up beautifully for that one. And of course, it's a wonderful payoff because he's an absolute shit. He's a deviant, a misogynist, a drug dealer, and a murderer. And he gets chucked off a cliff. Yeah, and it's great.
And the fact that you hear him screaming as he falls.
And yes, he dies screaming, and it's extremely gratifying. I don't believe that that's how you should deal with criminals. Nevertheless, when I'm watching an Arnold Schwarzenegger film made in 1985, that is exactly how you should deal with people like that. And it was very gratifying to watch and continues to be.
And this isn't a death that you can kind of, argue that, well, this guy, he's obviously just got the wrong political spectrum or he's clearly misunderstood. Sully is this is my podcast, and so on. Sully is a cunt. He really is. You just have to agree that dropping him off a cliff is, with all that you have at your disposal, is about the best way to dispose of him. It really is.
Yeah. In a story such as this, it would have been somehow wrong if he just found some handcuffs and then handcuffed him to a telegraph pole and said, "You wait here for the police to arrive. You'll be doing time for this, Sully." And that just wouldn't have worked.
Yeah. Especially if he set up the pun at the airport. You can't just finish it going, "Remember when I promised to kill you last? I lied. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to detain you as a citizen's arrest, and
And then I'm going to call 911 and deliver an anonymous tip.
Crime Stoppers. One of the things that Matrix did before he chopped Sully off, and it's just as well he did, he took a motel key out of his pocket, because this motel is where we see where Sully's meant to meet Cook.
Cook's great.
The Sun Inn, I think it was, which I think there's a branch of that in Staples Corner. It's a very seedy motel. It's 80s. You've got glass blocks in the room. You've got the adjoining door into the next room where, of course, there is a couple having sex, because that's what they do in motels in the 80s. You know, Cook comes in and Matrix uses Cindy as a sort of decoy room service. And they have quite a brutal fight, really. It's
a signature fight, isn't it?
It is, you know, that a gun is pulled, but ultimately it's two former, you know, army soldiers going at it in a confined space, but it's pretty tough.
Yes, it's you've got Connery and Shaw in from Rush with Love on the train, and then you've got Arnie and Bill Duke in Commando, and it's up there as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, if Fleming had written it any better.
Yeah, God forbid if Fleming had written the treatment of Commando. Christ, Sully would have been the hero. Bill Duke, a massively talented guy.
He was, yeah.
A filmmaker, director, and a man of tremendous works, associated with tough guy roles, but so much more. It stands to reason that he's probably the most talented guy out of the whole thing, and he was probably the toughest of the toughs.
Yeah.
Of the sort of like second tier of the henchmen in this movie, and of course he's the guy who's also responsible for one of the greatest lines in 80s cinema in Predator.
Oh, yes.
Anytime. That's Mac, played by Bill Duke, the great Bill Duke, I think we can safely call it.
And if, you know it's a good quote, if it gets repeated by an alien ad infinitum.
Anytime.
But they have their brutal fight, and it's sort of met with the comeback of all comebacks. So Duke says to Schwarzenegger just before he's about to shoot him, "Fuck you, asshole." Of course, his gun's empty. "Fuck you, asshole." So rephrase it as a question.
Turnabout is fair play.
And of course, he meets quite a grisly end. Again, another ending that was cut from my ITV viewing. He gets impaled on a broken chair leg.
Something like that. It's definitely impaled, and it's definitely something that was previously intact before this whole fight kicked off.
And it wasn't pleasant. And the fact that you hear the sound, you see the spike in him covered in blood. Cindy retches the sight. You know, for Schwarzenegger, it's probably just a standard Tuesday.
Absolutely. It's just a night out with the lads as far as Matrix is concerned.
If someone doesn't get impaled, it's something's gone horribly wrong.
A brilliant exchange as well earlier in the fight, in which Cook says that us Green Berets are going to kick him up, and to which Arnie's riposte is a classic. I eat Green Berets for breakfast, and right now I'm very hungry. Cracking line.
Oh God! So, and obviously there's a point to that. This isn't just some gratuitous fight. He's got maps. He's got documents in his car. There's a perfect audit trail. It's sitting in his car outside the lot. They go off to this random factory where they because it's sort out the seaplanes, isn't it?
Yes.
So, of course, he goes there. Schwarzenegger goes and murders a few more people just to find out exactly where this...
just to find some plans. There's some serious murder. He breaks the neck of this guy who just seems to me like, well, hang on. Was that necessary? You could have just knocked him out. You snapped his neck, man.
It's probably the janitor.
It's like, even the janitor obviously is carrying guns because it was the 80s. They were all at it, carrying the guns with the bags of cocaine.
And we go into the moral question. He may well be just a maintenance person there, funding. It's his second or third job to, feed his family. Does he? It's implied because he carries a gun. Does he know is he really an evil person?
Is he complicit? Is he
Yeah.
really complicit? Or is he, as you say, is he just doing some work? It's some after-hours work for the family. We'll never know. Obviously, we'll never know. We'll never find out.
This is Schwarzenegger, murder first, ask questions later, or not in
Yeah.
this case. But then, obviously, Schwarzenegger can't just go off to this magical mystery tropical island, with the seaplane and no weapons. He's got to go shopping. And what do you do? Supermarket sweep, army surplus store. This is not the army surplus store when I saw this film that was nearest to me on the Holloway Road that sold some dodgy combat trousers and high-vis vests. This is, I don't know, it's probably just a branch of Walmart now, but it's got everything. It's got claymores, machine guns, bazookas, the fucking works. No nectar points, but ultimately he fills up how many shopping trolleys with just gear, of murdering gear. This can't be misconstrued.
No. But did you notice that, you probably did notice it, because it is incredibly obvious, that when he takes the rocket launcher and puts it in the shopping cart, that poking out on the side of the rocket launcher is the instruction manual.
Yes.
Now remember that instruction manual, listeners, because it may be of some, it may come up again later on.
It's like a flat pack. You need the instructions.
It's the most obvious payoff that you're ever likely to see. But it's good though, it works.
Yeah, it's good. And the cops turn up because he's obviously triggered a silent alarm. And
well, he's taken a bulldozer and he's gone through the shop front with a bulldozer.
He may as well be a scouser. He's raiding an army surplus store. This isn't a news agent. He's not after 5,000 Benson and Hedges. He wants guns. He's there for the ordnance. Yeah, and he even finds the tasty stuff that's hidden behind the desk as well. Rich, do you think that's the same gun shop or as the one that was in Terminator, where Arnie goes to pick up his Uzi 9mm? See, the guy, he also says wrong too.
He also says wrong to that guy.
I don't know. Was that an army surplus store, or was that just a regular corner shop?
Yeah,
I'm not.
Yeah, you're right about it being an army surplus. I mean, there was an army surplus in Croydon, and it didn't have that kind of ordnance. It had a bullwhip, which was very exciting, but from an Indiana Jones point of view, not from a more fun adult point of view.
But clearly, the proprietor didn't see you as worthy of the hidden switch underneath.
Sadly, no, I never got to see the bounty that lay within. That may have been a good thing.
When in Croydon.
Indeed.
So Schwarzenegger gets lifted, as is probably, again, you're not going to argue with that. It's the officers turn up, they're just doing the job. Schwarzenegger gets carted off in the van, and we don't have to wait long for the payoff of the instruction manual, because the bazooka is in the back of the car. Cindy wasn't picked up as an accomplice because, why would she? The lady in the TWA outfit, in a convertible with a rather laden down.
Poking at the back of it. What should we do with that? What about that woman of colour over there on her own in a car with some guns? What should we do? I'll leave her.
This was Los Angeles,
wasn't it?
Time. Yeah.
And all that. Well.
Yeah. So she's clearly seen as, we won't worry about her. And the fact that we later realise she's probably got an inflatable dinghy in there as well. So she's not going around a Toyota Aygo. This is her big car. So Schwarzenegger gets towed away, and she uses her feminine wiles to charm the van drivers. They pull away. Maybe she's failed stalling the car or something like that. What happened to that lovely girl we were just flirting with? What's that she's getting out the back of the car? We're looking in the mirror. Rocket launcher. Shit. But we see, first of all, obviously she's got to get her eye in and everything. She can't just shoot this. This goes backwards, takes out a bus stop or something like that. So, of course, presumably, she's read the instruction manual. Yeah, she doesn't miss the second time.
That's glorious, though, isn't it? I mean, that when she shoots the wrong end of it. I mean, and Ray Dawn Chong is brilliant in this film.
Yes, and
I think that she actually makes this film because she's got all of her lines all her humour's really dry, and while there's all this frankly unbelievable violent nonsense going on around her, she's adding she's almost like the sort of like incredulous viewer, sort of like, making acerbic remarks throughout the whole thing and weighing in with some comic relief when required. She's brilliant, Ray Chong anyway, but this was a great turn, and I think that this movie would have been harder to accept actually if she hadn't have pulled it off so well.
Would you say that she's the Jiminy Cricket of this film? Matrix's conscience?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, now I wonder whether or not that might be the case. If that's the case, then in terms of the poor guard at the room full of all the answers, she wasn't doing a very good job. But yeah, conceivably.
Yeah. So obviously, Matrix escapes, and they go back and they go and steal the canoe with wings, as they put it.
The Grumman Goose.
Yes,
it's a Grumman Goose, as featured in one of my favourite TV shows when I was a kid, called Tales of the Gold Monkey, which was a Raiders of the Lost Ark ripoff by Universal that lasted for one season, and it was set in the 1930s, and it had that plane. Maybe not that specific plane, although it could well have been that specific plane, because it was only a few years earlier when it had been made. And yeah, it's a Grumman Goose.
Clearly doing the rounds on the sets of Hollywood at the time.
Yeah.
We've missed a little part where there's the various bits where we cut back to Bennett on his little hideaway with the wannabe president of Valverde. Another amusing line where they're talking to the local hoodlums who they've obviously lined up to guard Jenny, and the very suave line of slitting a little girl's throat is like cutting one butter. And it's just delivered like something out of The Simpsons or something by Bumblebee Man or something.
Yeah.
It's just, Vern, put the knife away and shut up.
Puts the knife away and shuts your mouth. The racial stereotyping in this movie is not one of its strong points. It's got to be said.
We do have a mention there of Bennett sort of almost reminisces of the time when he and Matrix would just mindlessly murder people. He said, we'd enjoy killing these people. Matrix would enjoy it too. And, this isn't, we play football in the park, jumpers for goalposts.
Your soldiers make me laugh. If Matrix was here, he'd laugh too. And it's kind of like wistfully reminiscing about this time when they were, running through the fields, just like murdering everything and everyone that was in sight. Like laughing along like something out of My Lovely Horse in Father Ted.
And yet, something that skipped over that was in the director's cut, and there is a mention of some of the places in the world that Matrix and his men have been in their former marine life. And one of the reasons why he missed out some of Jenny's childhood. They were working in Lebanon, Laos, Angola, Pakistan. These aren't Butlins. These aren't holiday homes. These are shitholes. These are places that you will need to go, and in their line of work, murder is an occupational hazard.
Yeah, and black ops as well, clearly.
Yeah,
and because that's right. Because you're right. Because in the director's cut, there's an extended scene when he's driving and he's essentially winning Jenny over. He's convincing Jenny to. He's convincing Cindy. To help him. And so he's, in the theatrical cut, it's a fairly short scene where he shows her the picture, and that seems to be enough. But then in the longer cut, he goes into more detail about horrible things he had to do while his kid was growing up, and that now all that was over, and he just wanted to get his daughter back and just lead a normal life with his huge array of guns in his basement.
Yeah, well, again, it's in America. What can you say?
Yeah.
Matrix is free from the police. He's got his gear. He's got his rubber dinghy. They've landed. They've taken the seaplane off. They've alerted Franklin Kirby to what could possibly be. And he said, "How will I know when to call?" And he goes, "Because all fucking hell will break loose."
Yes.
Basically saying, you will see the explosions. That is the signal. I'm not going to bother with flares. There's no Morse code.
I'm not going to make some strange owl noise.
It will be the smell of burning flesh. MDF will be flying through the air like fireworks.
And the screams of the dying. Yeah. When you hear men screaming for their mothers, that's when you should call in General Kirby.
But don't think too hard, because some of them will be the same men dying over and over again.
Over and over again.
We could only afford so many extras. So we get the sort of textbook getting ready. Schwarzenegger, he's got out of his dinghy, he's wearing his tiny little Speedos, and he's got to get ready. It's the sort of mini montage.
Yeah. Is this a good moment to just bring up the soundtrack, Rich?
Yes.
Because I love the soundtrack of this, and James Horner is one of my favourite soundtrack composers. Sadly passed away a few years ago in a plane accident at the age of 60, with so much more to give. But this was really early in his career, and it was quite a distinctive soundtrack with steel drums and a lot of electronic going on, and it's quite derivative of the other stuff that he did, but it's a very, and again, I think the distinctiveness of the score adds to this movie and makes this movie stand apart from similar movies of a similar genre at that time.
I think, because it's, while steel drums aren't something you'd associate with a film of this time, you remember it. You just think steel drums, and it's almost like a signature, isn't it? The fact that very similar theme that Horner used in, I think it was Red Heat.
Yes,
that sort of popped up in that, didn't it? The soundtrack for this film, it's quite diverse. Goes from, sort of jump into the end. We were laughing on Twitter earlier about it was. The film finished on the power station. Yeah. We've gone from steel drums, a bit of electronic, to
the power station.
80s supergroup.
Yeah.
It's good. And the fact that the steel drums play, they're not offensive, but they're there, they're distinctive.
Well, I hope they're not offensive. That would be really disappointing if they were offensive.
Well, I was thinking more offensive to the ears. They don't get away.
Yes, yeah. No, I wouldn't regard them as such. I think they're great. I mean, he picked up a lot of that. I mean, it's very similar to a film he scored called Gorky Park, which again was around that time. And there's a little bit like he did a film called Brainstorm with Chris Walken, which is a really, really good film, by the way. And there's lots of that in there. He was quite well known for borrowing heavily off his own stuff. And yeah, as you say, Red Heat, that melody, the steel drum melody, he actually replicates in a scene in Red Heat, which I picked out immediately when I went to see Red Heat.
Yeah.
So because I've seen all the Arnie films.
Yes.
All of them.
And it's just a shame we didn't use it in Titanic.
You see, I've never seen Titanic.
You're not missing.
And I didn't get involved in the sound. And yeah, once Horner got to his kind of like fluty stage, where he was doing those kind of sort of like rather weak or the authentic Irish kind of like folky stuff, I just kind of checked out. But yeah, this is peak Horner for me.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll save Titanic for the Laserdisc Video Club, which I'm sure I'll start in a decade's time.
But one assumes Aliens is on your incredibly long list of movies to do here, and that's another sort of Horner soundtrack as well. So
is it? Oh, right.
Whoever lucky person gets to do that one can have fun with that.
That'd be good. So, right, Schwarzenegger, he's got his combats on, he's got his war paint, the very tight little sort of vest, fishing vest that you get from which you probably could get in a Croydon surplus store.
Yes.
Somewhat stupidly ties the grenades to his vest by the pins.
Yes, that's incredibly daft.
Accident waiting to happen.
I mean, I wouldn't have signed that off. I've got to say. If I was doing health and safety there, I'd say, look, I'm sorry, John, but that's just not going to fly.
And then we find out that he is actually at the same mansion as Beverly Hills Cop.
Yes, Harold Lloyd Estate.
Probably on the other side of the mansion, we've got Eddie Murphy shooting up bad guys and
complaining about the noise next door. Keep it down over there, Commando.
Why are all those strange barracks just blowing up? So we've got these barracks that are clearly no expense spared. It's the finest MDF. These claymores that really are anti-personnel devices, yet seem to take out every set of barracks going. I don't know how many people. I don't know what the body count for this film was. I dread to think. It was standard, unnamed goons to have the worst aim in the world, similar to Stormtrooper, for example.
Stormtroopers in Star Wars, yeah.
You've got a rather large, albeit one-man target. None of them can hit him. You get Wilhelm screams. Bodies running around on fire. It's crazy. No one seems to run out of ammo.
Mm. Well, I mean, eventually he does, isn't he? Because he discards. I mean, that's the glory of the scene. He goes through the island, killing absolutely everybody, and he's magnificent deadheading all of those flowers as well, which is really quite artful. How he manages to do that while killing lots and lots of people, and then he discards his various accessories until he's left with his pistol.
You know, this is an uncut scene from Gardener's World, I'm sure. Discards his trowel, and we come to probably the scene that was subject to the most cuts, and we talked about earlier, the shed.
Yeah, the potting shed.
The potting shed. Again, a slight Alan Titchmarsh reference. He's cornered. He's surrounded by hired goons wearing bucket hats, looking like they've just come from a Stone Roses gig. He's trapped. What do? They shoot the shit out of the shed. It's obviously done quite well. It's not the same as mine. I got mine from Mitcham Sheds. Hello, if you're listening. And if you think he's knackered, they've ventilated the shed. Oh no. He's found the circular saws. Mm-hmm.
He's found the circular saws and a hatchet. Yeah.
So, needless to say, the circular saw takes probably a very acute angle off the top of someone's head. Basically, scalps them really.
That part stays in.
Yes, that does. Yeah. Obviously, does some bits and bobs and somehow manages to murder them all. And the arm cutting off.
Horrific.
It's weird, and there, I think from doing my research for this, did he hand the hand back to the person?
I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
No. If maybe he did, I don't know. I must go. I was quite taken aback by that. As I said, I think I don't know whether we were recording or not, but it did check me out for a moment while I recovered from that.
Yeah.
Because the man is lying on the floor. He's just had his arm cut off. It's very bloody. It's very graphic, and he's screaming. I mean, it's real. He's really. There's nothing sort of. It's yes. There's nothing cartoony at all about that moment, and I imagine that. Well, perhaps I imagine probably the reason why the censors in Britain dropped it was because it was so graphic, but. Actually, I think it kind of works better without it because it continues the fantasy.
Difficult to say about this film. It was almost too much.
I know, you've crossed the line there. But what this film does is it doesn't make you aware of any of the consequences of the horror of violence, of war and death. And in this one moment, it does. And this is not what this film is supposed to do. It's supposed to desensitize you to all of that stuff. Yeah. Whether that's a good thing or not, that's not the point. And it just doesn't work for me, that scene.
We have, it's similar to, we have a shared interest in Bond films. The fight. Or the scene with Arius, the wannabe president, he doesn't put up much of a fight. He's the head of the organisation, but they have a little bit of a shootout. They hide behind vases and all sorts. But ultimately, he dies quite quickly. There isn't much glory in his death. He meets a sticky end that's very painful. But what we're really waiting for is the showdown between Matrix and Bennett. Now, Jenny's escaped from her sort of little prison by, quite clever actually, using the door handle to force her way out the boarded up window. They've gone into, as most mansions have an underground sort of plumbing room with ovens and all these sort of, it's like an undersoil heating sort of system. And they basically fight mano a mano. These two guys, they hate each other. Matrix pities Bennett, we'll put it that way. But Bennett wants to prove something.
Yeah, but Matrix has got Bennett's number, hasn't he?
Yeah.
See, with the whole "you don't want to shoot me, you want to put a knife in me" and all of that thing. Yeah.
He knows he's got a screw loose, and he knows what's in his head, what motivates him. It's not just kill me. It's you want to make me suffer. You're a psychopath.
Yeah. He may have been tipped off by the fact that earlier in the movie, Bennett said that he would do this job for free because it was Matrix. Yeah. That may have given him some additional insight. I don't know, but it's possible.
I mean, something, everyone has different motivations. Maybe Bennett is one of these people who doesn't believe in currency. He lives he lives a simple life. As long as his chainmail armour is provided for him and a moustache comb, he's all right.
He lives in a self-sufficient lifestyle in suburbia, like Tom and Felicity, like The Good Life. Tom and Barbara in The Good Life. That's actually him. That's his double line.
I can imagine next time I go down to Surbiton, I'll go and see if he's down there.
In fact, actually, I don't think you've ever seen Tom Good and Bennett in the same room together.
Ooh, that's a point.
They are actually the same person.
Maybe that's the sequel. Yeah, they get some early blows in, and Schwarzenegger, he takes a couple of slash wounds to...
Yeah.
Obviously, he's topless at this point. So the slash wounds get him, and goading Bennett. Bennett has a gun, but he says, "You want to put a knife in me? Let's party." You know, this
Let's
isn't...
party. Yeah, that's a bit shit, actually. Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit Saturday night outside Wetherspoons. Too much hooch. Funny because again, it's quite a brutal fight. You know, there is full-on punching, but we've got the Bennett trying to push Matrix's head into an oven. Yeah. It's there's the sort of very sort of electrocution part.
That's brilliant. There, I love that. I love that part because Bennett's obviously loving that extra charge, and he comes out swinging straight afterwards. Obviously, he should be dead, but in fact, he's energised by this huge voltage.
That'd be the chainmail. It's a nice little conductor. It's like an electric blanket. Just after this pretty physical fight, Bennett manages to find his gun again, and it's, "I'm not going to shoot you between the eyes. I'm going to shoot you." And again, the Aussie part comes out. "I'm going to shoot you between the balls."
Yeah.
And Matrix, as you do, you've got to improvise. It's the 80s, but that was MacGyver, wasn't it? You pull a large piece of piping off the wall, javelin style, and you impale your former colleague
into a boiler.
Yeah.
So that the pipe is going into some kind of boiler, and so that there's a big plume of steam coming out of the pipe through Bennett's chest.
And I'll let you have this one.
To which Arnie's riposte is, "Let off some steam, Bennett." Thank you. I appreciate it.
You know, I'm not. I know Bennett. You know, Bennett's injured. He's clearly not feeling 100%. He's got a gun in his hand, and yet he's got enough time. His reactions are dented enough for Matrix to reach to the wall, dislodge piping that, you know, my local plumbers would probably charge a couple of hours, and give the old...
Yeah.
That's a job. He does it, and then throws it through Bennett into this boiler. So he's pierced skin, bone, chainmail, boiler. And even then, Bennett's face looks a little bit like that wasn't a bad way to go.
Well, I mean, I suppose, you know, if you've lived the life that Bennett has, then, you know, I imagine that's probably how he thought he would go.
Impaled in a boiler in the mansion from Beverly Hills Cop. I mean,
the main thing was there. The main thing is that Matrix was there.
Yes.
As long as Matrix was there, and they were laughing inside. They were laughing.
So Matrix has found Jenny. We haven't really talked about much, but let's be honest, she doesn't play a huge amount in this. They leave the hundreds of carcasses behind. This mansion's on fire. The Marines and his old boss have turned up, and of course you get the old, "Well, your job's still available."
Yeah.
Yeah. No chance.
No chance. And off he goes in his Grum and Goose. And
Cindy giving Jenny a hug as though she may as well be whispering, "I'm your new mummy."
I am your new mummy, which I think that's clearly the inference, is that this is how movies like this, this is how it should end, with, you know, Arnie going off with his new lady, and she taking on the role of mother figure.
Yeah. And you know, it's nice to have a film end on a happy ending, and we get the Power Station song.
We do indeed. We fight for love.
And ultimately, this film, we said it's an archetypal 80s film. It's one of Schwarzenegger's both best and perhaps, I would say worst, maybe lazy in a way.
I mean, it's the first one that he did of this type. I mean, he went on and did stuff like Red Heat and like Red... what was the name of that? Raw Deal, which is an atrocious film. That was a bad movie. Eraser, which was 90s, in fairness. You know, I mean, but prior to that, it had been like Conan.
Yeah.
The Barbarian, which some people like. I find that film to be very slow, personally.
Yeah.
And of course, Terminator, which is, I guess, is his breakthrough movie. And so this is, I think this was his first sort of like as action hero, if you discount Conan as action hero. And so I think that's the merit that it has. But you could argue that its films that went afterwards were better. I don't know though. There's a lightness of touch. There's a frothiness about it. It just seems to work. The pacing is good, and it's an unpretentious film.
And like you said, the tone of it, it isn't like it came out a similar time to Rambo 2.
Yeah.
This isn't. It knows what it is from the start.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest. One film this reminded me of one more recent film was Taken. And I think if they made this now, it would basically have Liam Neeson in it. I mean, most of these sort of films do, to be honest. But ultimately, his daughter gets kidnapped, and he goes on a murderous rampage against some slightly darker people than himself, and going off to foreign countries. And ultimately, he's the good guy, and everyone's evil. And happy days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Jason Statham is probably is a big successor to that Arnie legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think something I would have asked normally would be, if this film was made today, this script had been floating around in Hollywood for so long in hiatus, and they decided, we're going to make this film, it'd have a massive budget. Who would be perennial choice for the lead? And do you think Statham?
Well, I mean, if it was going to be a big budget film, no, because I don't think that Statham really makes big budget movies, not his own vehicles. I mean, he has done. I mean, like The Mechanic, I suppose, might have been the recent example of a bigger budget movie, and the Transporter films that he did. I can't say as I'm entirely au fait on who the big action heroes are at the moment. It seems unlikely to think of Matt Damon taking on a role like this. I just don't think they'd make this film.
No,
it's which I don't know whether or not it's probably a good thing, to be honest with you. But if you're looking at it from a point of view of nostalgia, it's a shame. But actually, in a more accurate way, it's probably as well. But they wouldn't necessarily make this film. It's definitely got its progenitors. I think of some of Seagal's films that. Some of those are truly awful, but some of them are quite good. I mean, I think of a film called Exit Wounds, which Seagal did, which is such a funny film. It was a kind of movie that, as I said, I saw it in the pictures at the time, and I thought, and it completely blew me away. It was just like such an audacious action film that was just willing to just cross almost every imaginable line, and it was just so much fun to watch, and I just ended up watching it loads and loads of time. I mean, I should be ashamed of myself really for having such atrocious taste in film, but nevertheless,
we wouldn't be talking today.
I know.
Well, the nostalgia level is high, for this film. It's Schwarzenegger in the 80s doing what he does. It's not quite as cutting edge as Terminator or anything like that, but we remember this film fondly because it doesn't pretend to be anything else. This isn't a political satire. The talk of military coup ends up just saying "fuck you." I'm going to murder you all.
Yeah. But I'm blown away by the fact that it exists in the same universe as Predator.
Yeah, it's strange, and the fact that a sequel for this ended up being Die Hard, and the country ended up being in Die Hard 2. So I suppose. Perhaps
it's in the same universe as Die Hard as well.
So maybe it was the president from this that they tried to overthrow was the guy they ended up going to Washington on the Christmas Eve.
Maybe so. Yes, indeed.
I have to think about that. But that was 90s.
Yeah,
I'm not worry about that.
I think so. Yeah. Somewhat out of your wheelhouse, I suppose. It would have been great actually if John McClane, not John McClane, that Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in Predator would actually have been Matrix.
Oh, Dutch.
That would have been Dutch. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, Dutch. That would have been fairly awesome.
Yeah. So maybe Predator was a prequel for this.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's been scarred, but although I suppose.
That would have been awesome, actually, if they'd have done that. If that had been a prequel. I mean, it will be an unofficial one, but just use the same name, but don't go too much into detail.
Yeah, and we'll say that these Marines who did survive that ordeal in the jungle, the Predator didn't kill these ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's obviously got some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Clearly, clearly he's a deeply troubled man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and he's a mass murderer.
Well, yeah.
There's clearly something very wrong going on in there.
Yeah, it says a lot. I mean, he's clearly unwell, and maybe social services should have a word with him about custody of the child.
I would have thought so. Interesting. One of the writers of this movie is Jeff Lowe, who has basically writing half of the TV shows on Netflix at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, he's done the whole. He's massively into. I think he's written loads of comics, and he's done Luke Cage and Daredevil, and he's done some Shield scripts, Defenders, Spider-Man. He's done a stack of stuff.
If he's written the Punisher, which I've seen the trailer for,
Which he has.
he has.
Yeah.
Fuck me, that looks good.
Yeah, no, he's a big wheel now in Marvel / Disney. So, and this is obviously must have been one of his much earlier projects.
I am interested. That is a film I want to see.
So there's some lineage in this one. There's some heritage to this movie. It's an influential film.
It's a tapestry.
It is.
Yes,
it is.
Oh, I like it.
It's a tapestry.
Ooh. And on that bombshell, I need to return this video to the shop before they charge me late fees. But Terry, you're going to be joining me in the near future. We're going to be talking the various Star Trek films that came out in the 80s.
Yes.
And I believe you're also my Indiana Jones correspondent.
I believe I might be taking that. Yes, yes,
So,
absolutely. I've got some opinions about Indiana Jones films. I'll tell you that right now.
And maybe you can use the bullwhip from the surplus store.
Tragically, I never bought the bullwhip.
Well, Terry, thank you very much for joining me for Commando, and I will see you for the next episode of Betamax Video Club.